You're very welcome to Radio Espial, episode 55. As you've seen, we're dealing with the Layla Brennan case. It's a full timeline, joined by Brian.
Evening, folks.
We're going to get straight into this. Again, thank you all for the recent subscribers. There's a viewer discretion here. We're going to be dealing with very difficult elements in this case. Case summary. On the 2nd of March 1999, a car pulls up on Nassau Street, Dublin, Ireland. Late at night, 24-year-old Layla Brennan from Clondalkin is walking on the street. The driver is looking for directions, but this hides his real predatory intentions. 3 days later, Layla's body is found dumped in Killakee Forest in the Dublin Mountains. This is the case of Layla Brennan and what happened to her. The subject matter will not be easy. Who was Layla Brennan? Our case background. Layla Brennan was born in 1974 to Margaret, Mags and Richard Brennan. At a very young age, her parents moved out from Dublin's inner city to Clondalkin. For the first 12 years of her life, she was an only child until the arrival of her baby brother. A year later, the family grew with the birth of her sister. Young Layla made friends easily and was outgoing and friendly. She attended Clondalkin in secondary school, and by the age of 16 she took up Saturday work as a receptionist at a dental clinic in Thomas Street, Dublin. She thrived on her newfound independence and within a year opted out of completing her leaving certificate at school and instead went to work at the clinic full time. She loved music and she loved dancing. She had a busy working and social life, and by 19 years of age had a steady boyfriend. All seemed well until her family soon realised Layla was increasingly isolating herself from her friends and spending considerable time with a boyfriend immersed in a Dublin inner city drug culture. The very worst, heroin. By age 22, Layla left her Clondalkin family home, and instead of the dreams of an apartment in Dublin, she drifted between halfway houses, hostels, friends' couches, anywhere she could find a bed, and a drug culture she was trapped in but wanted to escape. Something had to give, and it did. By late 1997, Layla lost her job at the dental clinic. Her employer got fed up with the excuses and no-shows. Now using heroin herself, Layla, desperate and lost, is back home in the family home in Clondalkin. Her mother Mags was relieved. At least now they knew where she was and were able to get her the help she needed. And progress was made with family support. Layla began attending counselling sessions, but she was emotionally exhausted and not yet ready to hold down a job and pay her own way. The previous years with her erratic boyfriend and trying to save him as well as herself had taken its toll. She felt worthless, and Mags struggled to help her daughter rebuild her once natural and outgoing confidence. The innocence of that 12-year-old Layla was long lost. Layla got the offer of being paid to mind a friend's young children, and once again she felt ready to leave the Clondalkin family home. Let's pick up our timeline at this point, and I hope the above has given you a far better sense of Layla Brennan than what has been spuriously reported in the media over the years, and I promise you we're going to talk an awful lot more about that when we get into this timeline. But just before that, again, a welcome to our regular good friend Brian. You're very welcome to the episode. Brian, I suppose early thoughts on this case. This is a tough one. This is a tough one.
Tough one. I mean, just reviewing it there earlier, Mick, it's heartbreaking stuff. Like they're all heartbreaking their own way, but like this, this girl was screwed from all sides, like and she was just getting things back on track, and between the perpetrator, the lies he spewed out, the way the media ran with it, it's just very, very tragic.
Yeah, there are so many different aspects, I suppose, to talk about in this case. We're going to do our best, and we hope we're going to do Layla Brennan our best and her family. This case, incidentally, hasn't been. Yes, there have been. I won't say, not books written about it, but there have been chapters and books written about it. Retired Detective Alan Bailey, I think, had a relatively short few pages on it in one of his books. I think that was Missing Presumed.
Chapter with stories. And the two guys and Colgan there, so he devoted a good few pages to it.
Yeah, and I think the most accurate book I found was Sarah McInerney's book. There's a word of warning here, and I'm going to be very firm on this. I'm saying it from the start. There's no arguments. We're here to explain the timeline and events of the Layla Brennan case. We're not here to entertain victim blaming, victim shaming, and, well, I wouldn't have done that or made those mistakes, etc., whatever, or righteous self-righteousness in the comment section of this episode. This has no relevance here and to this case. None of us are perfect human beings. Going down these avenues only help to enable and somehow excuse the acts and decisions of perpetrators of the most despicable and horrendous crimes. Perpetrators who deliberately target the weakest and most vulnerable in society. We're moving to December 1998. Again, that's what, getting on for 25 and a half, nearly 26 years ago. So cast your mind back to then. Cast your mind back to then and what was happening then. Technology, everything around it. Don't apply today's standards, today's morals, today's technology, everything. Don't apply that. Put yourself back in that place and that time and what was happening. December 1998. Layla has formed a very close relationship with a new boyfriend called John. They've known each other for several months. He's different. He's steady, clean, and besotted with Layla. But she is still struggling with her self-worth despite the counselling. Her mother Mags recalls that the couple returned to the house after Christmas Mass and John gave her a beautiful new watch as a gift. But Layla was ashamed she couldn't return such a similar gift for John. No job, no financial independence. She sobbed with her mother that John deserved so much more than her. February 1999. Layla has enrolled in a FOSS training course for a new job. While her family wanted her to stay in the Clondalkin family home, she once again decides to move out and make another go of emotional and financial independence. Brian, is there anything you want to add?
I think, fair dues to her. She got herself together, and it was good she had supportive parents there as well. So it was good she got back home anyway, and that she took the help, because oftentimes in these situations, like, there's just the parents are at a loss in the end because the person doesn't want help. Obviously, she wanted help. Yeah,
you can't do anything for somebody who doesn't want it.
Want to help themselves, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but I think fair dues to her. She got off her backside and wanted to get herself sorted, and got the. That's good. That's good. She got a supportive boyfriend there and everything. It sounds like they had a good Christmas, and then she got on the FOSS course there. So she was definitely somebody who wanted to get herself independent and clean and everything again.
And again, to touch on it, this is something that wasn't properly gone into and reported by the media at the time, because they were on their own wild, roller coaster media train. So March the 1st. We're late at night, March the 1st, into the early hours of March the 2nd, 1999. That was a Monday into Tuesday. Let's be very clear about this. No one can write all the books, articles, the headlines, do the podcasts, do the videos, but no one knows the full events that led to Layla being in the Fitzwilliam, Nassau Street areas that evening in Dublin. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. They are areas known as prostitution pickup points in Dublin. It's never been proven if Layla was simply walking in that area at the time, or she was back to finding ways to earn quick money. It has never been established now how involved Layla became in the world of prostitution, and her family remain adamant that she was no career street girl as portrayed in the media. So at midnight, what is known is that Philip Colgan from Rathfarnham was out with a friend in Dublin city centre with an old prison friend, Stephen Curdy. The two men drifted from Stephen's Green towards Temple Bar, frequenting at least two pubs, finally getting into conversation in one of them with two young women. Their endeavours ended when both men were refused entry by doormen to a Temple Street bar, having accompanied the two women there. I think that was down from Stephen's Green. I believe it might have been Eamon Doran's was the name of the pub. Note.
That's Temple Bar.
Yeah. Both women are already moving to safety. Why? I haven't written this in, but I know this. One of the girls, her boyfriend, was the barman in the Temple Street pub. Those two women were moving away from Colgan and Curdy and moving to a safe place, a safe, busy spot where they were known. And that's important. An argument ensued between Colgan and Curdy after refusal from the venue, and Curdy decided that was it, he'd had enough, he was heading home for the night. Colgan instead heads back up in the direction we believe of Stephen's Green to where he's parked his vehicle. Later, following his arrest, in a series of bizarre interviews with detectives, Colgan would present a number of excuses as to why he was where he was when he met Layla Brennan on Nassau Street around, we believe, between 1 and 2 a.m, but we can never be certain. Now, in one of the early statements, Colgan, remember, this whole perception of Layla is coming through the words of Colgan and what he told initially detectives, and would, in a bizarre turn of events, change and switch things around. And boy, you haven't heard this roller coaster of 8 statements. So I'm reading from Sarah McInerney's book, Where No One Can Hear You Scream, and I think this encapsulates it. Philip Colgan later told Gardaí a myriad of different versions of exactly what happened next. Of these, Garda believe that his first account of events is probably the closest to what actually took place, although they are aware that even this story is almost certainly slanted to show Colgan in the best possible light. So Philip Colgan said Layla Brennan was a prostitute, and that he had picked her up to have sex with her, having agreed on a sum of £60. He said that he parked outside the Belvedere Rugby Club in Simmons Court in Ballsbridge, and both he and Layla had a cigarette. Then he said Layla began to take off her clothes. Suddenly Colgan decided he didn't want to have sex with her anymore and told her to get dressed again. Layla was insistent that he still pay her the £60 and warned him that she had noted his registration car number and would tell the police if he didn't pay her. The mention of the Gardaí made Colgan panic. He was determined not to go back to prison. When Layla made a statement that she was getting out of the car, Colgan pulled her back and hit her twice, 2 quick hard punches in the face. The second blow was vicious enough to knock Layla unconscious. In his statement to Gardaí, Colgan said, "Once I hit her, I knew I had to kill her." Now, in that time frame, 1 to 2 a.m, what we do know is that Layla and Colgan were together in his vehicle, and she would be dead and deposited at a site in the Dublin Mountains, less than a half-hour's drive away. That night, all that could be later ascertained is that Colgan drove his vehicle in the direction of Donnybrook and later into the mountains beyond Rathfarnham and Tala before driving down the mountain drive. He's still a short 10 to 15 minutes drive from his home. At 2:20 a.m, Philip Colgan rings his wife Mary. He is driven to the bottom of the mountains and on to St Anne's Park in Raheny on the north side of the city. Now, quite why Colgan drove to the north side of the city is unknown. has never been explained. He asks Mary, his wife, to come and collect him, and that he was stopped by the Gardaí and beaten. March the 4th, 1999, so the Thursday now we're into. A full day has gone by. No one has heard from Layla, but this isn't unusual after a move from our Clondalkin family home. No missing report is filed, remember, at this point. This all changes the following day, on March the 5th, 1999. This is the Friday now. So we've gone on from the Monday into the early hours of Tuesday morning. We're now at the Friday. And this must have been quite extraordinary for the Garda officer on point in this station, in Rathfarnham Garda Station. In the door walks Mary and Philip Colgan into Rathfarnham Garda Station. The couple have been married about a year. They wish to report a murder, and the confessed culprit is standing right in front of them. Unknown to Gardaí and the Brennan family, Mary Colgan has been dealing with a confession by her new husband for the past 2 days and coming to terms with what is happening around her. First, that he was with a woman on the night she picked him up and not beaten by the Gardaí. Another 24 hours later pass before he reveals that it's more than infidelity that she has to deal with. She has spent hours with him, getting him to write down all the events of the evening and the early morning of March 1st, 2nd, and that included the deposition site of Layla. How Mary met Philip Colgan is discussed in our conclusions. This is close to the deposition site. Not a pleasant picture. It is the recovery. I believe this is actually, I have it down for our timeline as March 5th. I believe this is actually Saturday morning. The Brennan family see and hear the news on TV and radio that a body has been found in the Dublin Mountains. They don't think anything immediately of it, but it's increasingly becoming the headline news. Layla's young brother is 10. It's now the evening and he has finished a week of school. Something has piqued his interest. The RTE News is beginning to report news of a woman's body found in the mountains, but critical details are being leaked in the media. This woman had a small scar on her right eyebrow. Children know, they somehow know, just somehow. 10-year-old child. They don't read newspapers. They watch TV. In 1999, RTE still operated teletext. I think it was called Airtel at the time. He reads something. My big sister had a scar on her right eyebrow like that woman in the mountains. Mags, his mother, notices his interest in the Airtel article, and he just says he's, researching or just looking at something, trying to find something out for school. Brian, we're on to the 6th of March 1999. This is this Saturday morning. This is effectively when Colgan revealed the deposition site. Yeah. This map, we're both pretty familiar with this map, aren't we?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one of the. I mean, obviously, apart from the murder itself, I think that's one of the most poignant parts of it. There, the little boy figuring it out, and I think that that's unbelievable. But the statements that Colgan made, really, you expect people to believe. As if even if Layla was soliciting, was she really going to go? Oh, I'll go to the Gardaí and say he wouldn't pay me the 60 quid for sex. Do you know what I mean?
Hang on. We'll give him a phone call and we'll say, here, pay up, man. That's not going to work.
It was rubbish from the start, and I think there was two different statements as well. That at first, he'd said he had this, that he turned her down for sex, and then he said as well to the wife that he cheated with the prostitute or something, or cheated with another woman. Yeah. So he was. His statement.
He was just slowly but surely revealing more and more at each stage.
Yeah, and there was one quote about that. He said something like, it's pure rehearsal. Once he got all his had the opportunity to put it all together, then he said, he realised the enormity of what he'd done. As if someone like him was going to come out. It was anyway, we come back to that later.
Yeah.
But like, it's just mad stuff. Like,
Yeah.
you know.
On the map itself, like I said, we're so familiar. I think we've showed different iterations. I think in a previous episode, I think it was wasn't it the Larry Murphy
cases.
episode?
Yeah.
You know, because I remember that the DSPCA centre, we had a body just south of that.
Yeah. With Patricia Doherty.
Yeah.
And the ones that we know of, Patricia Doherty, Antoinette Smith. There was discussion in relation to Annie McCarthy, but that's moved away from there now.
Yeah.
And I think with this case as well, and then there was the attack by the other two, Stokes and Porter. Sorry, I got his name wrong there. Sorry, those two guys anyway were at it there. That was a few years earlier in 1994. So like, there's several different cases there, and you know that.
I know. We just like I said, if you followed any of our episodes, going back from the Larry Murphy case and previously Antoinette Smith, Patricia Doherty, many of the other cases, you're looking at a map and you'll already be familiar with names like Glassmucky Mountain, Killakee, Glendew, you know, the Hellfire Club, and incidentally, Layla Brennan's body was found just a little bit further south, between where you see the Killakee Point and the Hellfire Club, just in between there, off the road, in a ditch. That's where, and I've heard numerous spurious articles written. They keep going, Wicklow. She wasn't found in Wicklow. The Wicklow border is much further south. For God's sake, people, if you can't write an article, you can get those basic facts right. Don't bother. Layla's grandmother, on the Saturday, is on the phone to Mags and Richard. "Where's Layla?" she asks. "Why hasn't she visited me in 2 weeks? It's not like Layla. Please don't tell me this is Layla on the news." Richard starts to panic and drive around the local area and beyond. And parents know, grandparents too. They just know, somehow. What they didn't know at the time was that the previous day a man had walked into a Rathfarnham Garda station and not only confessed to a murder, but he'd indicated, and they'd went to the deposition site. And in fact, within half an hour of them getting there, they found Layla's body. Layla Brennan's case had skipped the missing person phase and had moved straight to murder, and also the location of a body, all within 24 hours. Richard Brennan had the task of visiting Rathfarnham Garda Station. At that stage, that's where he went, and he had to identify his daughter's body that evening in the morgue. On March the 10th, Layla Brennan was laid to rest. Her family and friends gathered at Neilstown St. Peter's Apostolate Church in Clondalkin for her funeral. March into April, following arrest, Philip Colgan was admitted to the Central Mental Hospital in Dundrum, and after assessment he was returned to Mountjoy Prison. I just have down there a note on the Garda, because I know people will have lots of questions, but remember, it wasn't until the Friday when Mary and Philip Colgan walked into that Rathfarnham Garda station they had any clue anybody was missing, or there was even a case to be solved. And yet, within a matter of hours, they were already dealing with a body deposition site and a confession from somebody that they'd murdered Layla. Now, of course, naturally, Colgan would recant that and plead not guilty at the actual trial, but more about that later. Please, again, there's viewer discretion here. These are not easy things. This is the autopsy forensic evidence. Philip Colgan stripped Layla Brennan almost naked, leaving her foot clad in a sock and shoe, and her underwear rolled and wrapped around her right ankle. He strangled her with her bra so furiously that the metal wires cut into her neck. When moving her to the designated deposit zone, he transported her in the boot of his car. He realised he wasn't certain she was dead. Dumping her into a ditch incline, he decided he'd beat her with a heavy brace he got from the same boot of his vehicle. In other words, after the strangulation, the heavy wheel brace was just one of the final acts to make sure the job was done properly. State pathologist, I think she might have even been the assistant state pathologist at the time, Dr. Marie Cassidy's post-mortem report found Miss Brennan's bruises around her face that could have temporarily stunned her. She had injuries to her mouth and over her face which could have prevented her making any noise, and had definitely asphyxiation signs. Layla also had a severe skull fracture from the wheel brace. Colgan gathered up her clothing in a bag and clumsily deposited them in a shed beside his house in Rathfarnham. They would be found along with some other forensic evidence of Layla in Colgan's vehicle. The blood spatter on the outside of the clothing would later indicate that Layla was initially beaten with her clothes on, because the splatter was on the outside of the clothes, so clearly he was already beating and assaulting her before she stripped. There was also blood spatter in the car, and hair fibres and hair strands were found in his car. Critically, Dr. Marie Cassidy found that all of Layla's organs and teeth were healthy. She was also somewhat overweight for her age and height, and toxicology tests showed no signs of any drugs in her system. We're going to get into more of this when we talk about the media and the conclusions. The media didn't know anything about this report. What this report clearly defines is that this so-called heroin addict and prostitute wasn't quite what was being reported. Anybody that takes crack, cocaine, heroin, heavy hard drugs like that experiences damage to the bones, the teeth, the gums, severe, the eyes, the whole structure. You immediately, the orbital areas, the nose, you immediately know somebody is heavily involved in hard drugs. Layla showed none of those signs. October 2006, in the Central Criminal Court, Colgan is tried for Layla Brennan's murder. At Dublin Central Criminal Court, detectives would outline the various changing statements Colgan would make to them. His wife, Mary Colgan, would outline the multiple changing stories he concocted to her to explain the events of the early morning of March 2nd, 1999. One version was that Colgan claimed he met a Scotchman called Wayne in a gay bar, and they together plotted to pick up a woman, but this only happened because Colgan was forced to go through at knife point. In another version, Colgan invented a homeless man he picked up on the street, and it was they who both carried out the crime after spotting Layla on Dame Street. A third version involved both the Scottish man and the homeless man being present during the violent act. In a final version, realising he'd been undone by the evidence against him, blood and hair in his car from Layla, he claimed he had stopped to ask Layla for directions because he was drunk after a night out with a friend and was confused as to how to get home while driving from the city centre to Rathfarnham. What became clear in the trial was that Colgan was devious and a compulsive liar, and a very disturbed man with no less than 8 garbled statements which all conflicted each other. In her summing up, prosecution counsel Miss Maureen Clark SC told the jury Colgan was a cold, dispassionate, calculating and clever liar who had employed a Halloween story, a film script from a horror story, in trying to dupe the jury. Miss Clark had urged the jury to attach enormous importance to the fact that in his first 8 statements and memos, remember the ones that Mary got him to write, given to Gardaí, the accused had given details of how Miss Brennan met her death that accorded with the Deputy State Pathologist's report. In one statement, The accused said he hit the deceased in the face twice, that she had been stunned, and that he had put his hands over her mouth and grabbed her by the throat and squeezed, counsel had said. Philip Colgan, by then 27, of Clonacastle, Rathfarnham, County Dublin, had denied murdering Miss Layla Brennan, 24, of Moorfield Green, Ronanstown, County Dublin. He was found guilty and given a life imprisonment sentence. It wasn't all plain sailing. Over a number of hours of deliberation, 2 jurors weren't quite convinced and held out for a time. Ironically, 2 young women jurors. I know, the mind boggles. But ultimately, the jury did reach a unanimous verdict. In the words of Justice Paul Butler, who presided over the case, he said, "I had to fight back tears as a result of it, of the evidence in the case and the devastation for Layla Brennan's family." And there he is, Mr. Colgan. Enough of him. Philip Colgan. What we or the Brennan family didn't know at the time in 1999. At the age of 19, Colgan, while walking home after seeing his then girlfriend, not Mary, safely to a taxi, broke into an old age facility late at night and assaulted, tied up and raped a 79-year-old woman. Just days later, a Spanish student pickup was his next victim, under the guise that he knew where they could go back to a late night party, which just happened to be in his own home in Donamead, where he was living at the time. She, the Spanish student, managed to escape and survive. Sentence running 8 years and 6 years running concurrently. He was released 1 year before coming upon Layla in Nassau Street, Dublin. It's a pattern we explore in the profile of Larry Murphy. Brian, please, yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, he didn't serve, he actually served the 6 then out of the
effectively, yeah, just over the 6 years he actually served.
Yeah, the trial was 92 when he got sentenced then, and then he was out in 98. So, yeah.
I know an awful lot of people argue, why do, if you've done one crime and maybe there are multiple criminal infringements of that one crime, okay, maybe a sentence should run concurrently, the parts of it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
2 separate things. Like.
Two separate crimes. Days later, and I know there was a suggestion that there was going to be a challenge on the leniency of the sentence, but it ultimately never happened. It was never challenged.
If you give a 6 and 8 concurrently, at least make him serve the 8.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's too bloody lenient anyway. He should never have been out in the first place when he murdered Layla Brennan.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay, we're going to move to our conclusions and analysis. So I'm going to get straight to the point. Look, one of the biggest challenges in this case was separating out Layla Brennan from Philip Colgan and what was reported in the media, rather than what it should have been, the trial and the book of evidence. A victim should never be seen by the media through the prism of the perpetrator's accounts. In life and death, Layla became a double victim of Philip Colgan. And I believe that is a trap the mainstream media, before and even after the trial, were happy to fall into, much to the disgust of Layla Brennan's family. To paraphrase the family statements after the conviction about their daughter and how she was seen through the media based on her perpetrator's claims, to them, the family, our daughter became a heroin addict and prostitute. So says the man who murdered her, Philip Colgan. So believe him. Like, it's fucking nuts.
Madness. Yeah. And that's the selection you've got there, Mick. Like, there's so many other of these headlines. I mean, just seeing some of the newspaper reports, it says like, another one is wife of murder suspect says he told her he strangled prostitute. Husband told me about killing prostitute. You've got prostitute strangled. Pathologist tells trial. The pathologist does not tell the trial that prostitute was strangled. Mary Cassidy. I don't believe Mary Cassidy stood up in court and said this prostitute was strangled. Like,
yeah.
I mean, you've got other man murdered prostitutes, says accused. Like, there's just a whole list of these, and from what I can see, a whole lot of them were by this Suzanne McManus, and even later on, when she, I think
when she tries to recover our reputation with, murder victim who struggled till the end. I can play the feminist line and try and recover my reputation here. Oh, I actually now have listened to the book of fucking evidence this time, and actually now I realise, we might have went a bit over the top here. Yeah, sorry, sweetheart, didn't work. Yeah,
because that was 29th of October 2000.
Yeah,
and then the same one wrote another one to say, from living on the streets to death in the mountains.
Yeah, back to our old tact. Yeah,
trying to, this bloody journalese kind of sensationalism, off the back of that girl's death. And I mean, it's and I think this is the most disgusting thing, apart from the murder itself. One of the most disgusting things is the way the media took this guy's narrative and his narrative,
his myriad of 8 different statements, which were bizarre. But hey, let's all believe Philip Colgan and how he describes the woman he murdered, because let's all just go with that, because that must be true.
The common part of his narrative, that she was a prostitute and or whatever, that's the bit that became the narrative then, and that's shocking, and that nobody turned around and said, hang on a second, and in fairness, just to give the other side there, Mick, I think back where I come, the Examiner went along with this stuff, this bloody Suzanne McManus, but the Echo, which was the other local paper, it was the evening
in Cork,
paper at the time. In fairness, they had 3 of their headlines were: victim remembered as caring woman, grief as tragic victim is buried, victim's family tell neighbours thanks, and that's the only mention of the family in I can see in that list. No, that's not to say we're mentioned in other publications, but that Suzanne McManus, who had most of them, where was her mention about the family or concern for the victim? Do you know what I mean? It was just these kind of sordid type of headlines, So it was just very poor show from most of the media.
Yeah, and without any basis of proof, that's what the media ran with in headlines, using Colgan's leaked statements before and during the actual trial. Yeah. There's an obvious question in this case. And we're not going to ignore it. We rarely shy away from difficult questions in a case. Mary Colgan, the wife who brought her husband to Rathfarnham Garda Station. Who was Mary Colgan? Okay, we said earlier on we were going to go into some of these because I think for context it's important. Mary Colgan, that's her married name. Okay, we're not using her maiden name. Was a music teacher. Yeah, I know you're going to take a deep breath here. In Wheatfield Prison, and it was there she met inmate Philip Colgan, and a serious romance formed. During this time, Colgan completed a sex offender rehabilitation program. Colgan was released from prison in April 1998. Mary was fully aware of Colgan's previous crimes. The couple married in September 1998, and they lived together at Mary's home in Rathfarnham. Within months, the abuse began. Mary knew deep down she'd made a mistake. Yeah, she certainly did. She already had her suspicions. It was only after the murder of Layla Brennan that senior and lead detective Tom Doyle was able to confirm Mary's suspicions. Yeah, Colgan had been flaunting his charms with other young local women in the Rathfarnham area, and there had been many incidences which were never reported formally to Gardaí. Within weeks of married life, Colgan was back to his old ways. When Colgan returned home, panicked and in a confused state in the early hours of March the 2nd, 1999, having murdered Layla Brennan, Mary Colgan knew something bad had happened, and she was ready to hang Philip Colgan out to dry. She pushed and pushed him until he finally confessed to her that he'd killed, and she carefully got him to record it in writing memos over 24 hours before escorting him to Rathfarnham Garda Station. The charm of the 6-foot womanizer was over, and it took a woman who loved him to deliver him to the hands of justice. Had she remained silent, whatever you may believe about her, and how she met Colgan and the decisions she made. Had she remained silent and covered for Colgan, who knows the victims and crimes Philip Colgan would have went on to commit. Yeah,
I think she showed great. I know she at least she acknowledged her mistake. She didn't stay deluded or anything about it. But how the hell did she get him to write it all down? And I mean, she must have been in fear of her own life at that point to say, "What if he turns on me?" Like, but she held her nerve and got him to do it anyway.
If he's told me he's killed, what's going to happen to me? Because he's going to twig. Hang on a second. What's she doing? She's got me to write all this down. I'm going to burn this and get rid of her. Yeah. So she was taking in a huge risk.
Yeah. But I think Alan Bailey's taking it was that, like, it would be too obvious if he did get rid of her, like, or something, you know, and that he kind of, but, you know, I mean, she stuck her neck out in a big way.
Well, hang on, but not necessarily, because this is prior to Mary and Philip walking into Rathfarnham Garda Station. So, man kills, wife in house in Rathfarnham. Why would there be? Gardaí have no idea Layla Brennan is missing. Either, so where would they? It could have. Maybe there would have been a connection made later. But it could have been decades before any connection was. Hang on a second. Was he involved in that? We don't know.
Yeah, and he could have fled as well. That was
yes,
thing. I mean,
off to England or the US or wherever.
To the north, off to Scotland, and gone, like, it's so she, people like that don't always think that way. She must have had some kind of sway over him anyway. But like people like that just think, right, I've used her now. She's no more used to me. So
that's good luck.
Unfortunately, that's the way these people think. Like, but anyway, she realised her mistake and did the best she could to put it right.
Did the right thing to at least try and put it right.
Yeah.
So Layla Brennan, from the outset of her murder, was branded a drug addict and prostitute. Well, there's no doubt that Layla had used heroin, and there is some circumstantial evidence that she may have turned to prostitution as a quick fix for money during periods of time. There remains no evidence that in March 1999 she was an active street girl and heroin addict.
But actually, Mick, further to that, toxicology reports don't lie.
No, they don't.
I think the second bit, it's not that there's no evidence that she was a heroin addict. There's evidence that she wasn't a heroin addict.
She wasn't, exactly.
And so it's actually, they've been very thorough in that autopsy, and it's very clear. It's there in black and white. There was no drugs in her system. Her body was healthy, so clearly she'd been off them for a while. So that's
and if she was ever regularly taking heroin, it could not have been for very long, because there would have been serious damage done even at that young age, and there was no signs of any of that. And the fact that, again, it was in the assessment of the body that she was somewhat slightly over her natural weight for her height and build, again, doesn't reflect someone who is heavily taking very hard drugs, because it emaciates the body.
Yeah, and there'd be the holes in the arms. The circulatory system, the digestive system, the whole lot would have been blackjacks from it, like.
Okay, prostitutes were interviewed across Dublin as part of evidence gathering, and none of the regular girls on their street beats recognised or even knew Layla Brennan. The active Dublin Vice Squad detectives could offer nor find records of stops, cautions, let alone convictions that had anything to do with Layla Brennan.
I think, Mick, as well, on top of that, like Vice Squad detectives, even though there's no official things or whatever, like, those guys would have known all those people anyway.
Knew all of those girls by name, by look,
Exactly. They knew them all well, like,
So my own best analysis of this case, and the multiple wild and changing statements provided by Colgan, is that his original and first statement, in company with Mary, his wife, better matched what really happened, and that the rest were ruses by Colgan as he tried to confuse and outwit detectives by introducing non-existent accomplices, to rid himself of any last remaining morsel of remorse he might have had, and unloading, transferring the responsibility on these fantasy characters. I mean, we had the like I said, the statements were. I think we had the Scotsman Wayne from the gay bar he apparently met, and then Wayne was with him in the car when they abducted and killed Layla. Then he said no, Wayne wasn't there. Then there was this homeless man that he picked up, and he was the guy that did it. Then all of a sudden there was another. This must have been the 4th or 5th of the 8 statements, where actually those fantasy people they were both in the back of my car at the time. You know, all 4 of us were actually in the car. It was just nuts as he tried to outthink himself and tried to outthink detectives with this nonsense.
Or even if he was trying to cause confusion, like, I mean, he just backfired on him, like, because I mean, you know, there was still, like, he seemed to forget, like, there was a crime scene there and all the evidence that was there that contradicted him, like,
yeah.
Like the fact that he said she was stripped off, well, she wasn't, she was beat through clothes, like,
yeah,
you know, and all that. So all the actual physical evidence that they had contradicted him, like, you know, and so, you know, he was.
And when you're being interviewed, particularly about a very serious crime, detectives obviously want you to tell the truth, and they want you to talk and talk, because they know if you keep talking and talking and talking, you will talk circles around yourself. Yeah. And you will say things, and then you will start introducing unimportant details. Is a spotter that somebody is lying. You know, they start introducing ridiculously detailed unimportant issues, points of that are irrelevant to what's actually being asked, and they'll let you tie you up in circles, and then bang, they'll hit you. You went there. We know you went there because we know you were there. How do we know you were there? You're on CCTV, or because you used your phone there. So now, do you want to retell? And the perpetrator starts trying to reinvent and re-explain in light of what they've just been told, and then they go on a bit, and then they make up a little bit more. And then they're confronted and said, well, actually, here's another picture, or someone told us they spoke to you on the phone, or you were seen at this point, not where you claimed to. And everything just keeps unraveling, and they just keep inventing, re-embellishing their story. And I mean, Colgan was a classic example. God knows what that man would have done had he not have been turned in by his wife.
Well, definitely, and the 3 cases we know about, that was. I'd say I'm sure there's other things he got up to there, like, and, you know. But he's a really bad egg. He's just one of these guys that should just not get out again. And he's kind of, you know, I mean, you know, people like him, you know, Colin Whelan, Joe O'Reilly, Graham DeWard, that McLaughlin guy, like, none of these guys should see the light of day again, like, you know, because, you know, they'll just go back and do something like that again, like. And there's a few people around them had lucky escapes as well, like, you know. Yeah, no,
so, absolutely.
To some of them anyway, you know. So he's, just he shouldn't have been out in the first place either, like. No. You know, shouldn't have been out in the first place. Yeah. So that's one thing. I think and had he not have Layla Brennan would hopefully still been walking this earth and getting on with our life. Exactly. It's really awful case, and like I said, that girl's got her life back on track, and then you've this, and then on top of all that, then all the media stuff. Like, I mean, geez, like the media really, and some of these are supposed to be reputable newspapers, the Irish Independent, Sunday Independent, Irish Examiner, like, and they printed this rubbish. It's like come on, boys and girls, you're better than this. Yeah, I mean, they're a disgrace, to be honest. Like, you know, it's just kind of rag stuff, really, that they were printing. Really, they're supposed to be broadsheets, and they were printing raggy stuff, like, you know. Brian, thankfully haven't heard that Suzanne McManus since anyway, like, you know. Brian, as we haven't shared our final thoughts, there's one obvious thing that we have to mention that's glaringly absent, and that's Layla.
We did our best to get you a photograph of Layla, but understandably, in light of what we've just spoken about in regards to the media, there was effectively a scrub put on a lot of what was put out by the media, and that's why there's an image of Layla that is absent from here. And I think this is the first case, Brian, I think that we've ever, of the 60, 70 cases that we've covered, that I've ever had to do an episode where I could not show you an image. I can show you the fucker that killed her, but I can't show you an image of Layla Brennan. And I have to respect, after the trial, that was the wishes of the family. Guys, this was a tough one. Thank you for joining us for episode 55 on Radio Espial. It's been a difficult one. It wasn't easy viewing and listening, but sometimes these cases aren't. We will return in a couple of weeks with our next timeline case. Don't know what it is. Don't hold us to that. I'm not absolutely certain. But as always, God bless and take care of each other.
Thanks for tuning in, folks. All the best.
Yeah, take care. Thanks, Brian.
Bye now.